When you think about the origins of modern economics, where does your mind go? For most of us, it's a lecture hall in 18th century Scotland, where a philosopher named Adam Smith is drafting The Wealth of Nations. We've all been taught that economics as a science began in 1776, with Smith as its undisputed father. But here lies the paradox. What if I told you that the official story leaves out a crucial chapter? What if the core mechanics of supply and demand, the dangers of monopolies, and the very definition of fair market value were not discovered in the European Enlightenment, but nearly 500 years earlier, under the sun of the medieval Islamic world? This video is about Ibn Taymiyyah, a 14th century polymath who developed a sophisticated theory of market justice while Europe was still in the Dark Ages. We are going to deconstruct his 3 laws of money concepts that redefine currency not as a prize to be won, but as a public utility essential for a fair society. And make sure to stick around until the end, where I will break down how I have personally used his just price framework to rethink my own approach to modern investing and inflation. This is the lost history of economics. Let's jump into it. This deep dive is inspired by the extensive works of Majmu' al-Fatawa by Ibn Taymiyyah and the historical analysis found in the lost history of Islamic economics. To understand his genius, we first have to understand the mind trap we are currently living in. In the modern world, we view money as capital, something to be hoarded, rented, and grown for its own sake. But Ibn Taymiyyah, building on the work of Al-Ghazali, saw money completely differently. He viewed it as a social tool. To explain how this works, we can break his philosophy down into 3 core principles of market justice. Principle number 1, the mirror effect: money does not equal commodity. The first principle addresses a fundamental error in how we view wealth. Al-Ghazali and Ibn Taymiyyah argued that money is like a mirror. A mirror has no color of its own, but it reflects every color placed before it. Similarly, money has no intrinsic value. You can't eat gold, and you can't live inside a silver coin. Its only purpose is to reflect the value of other goods to make trade easier. The actionable takeaway is this. When you treat money as a commodity, when you hoard it, or try to sell money for more money interest, you are trying to give the mirror a color. You distort the reflection. Ibn Taymiyyah warned that when money is treated as a product rather than a measure, it creates artificial inflation and destroys the economy for the common man. He anticipated the dangers of a financialized economy centuries before Wall Street existed. Principle number 2, the natural price, the invisible hand. Now let's move on to the second principle. Centuries before, Adam Smith wrote about the invisible hand. Ibn Taymiyyah observed that prices rise and fall naturally. He famously wrote, "If desire for the good increases while its availability decreases, its price rises. This happens by the will of Allah." He recognized that price fluctuation is not always the result of greed. It is often a natural signal of scarcity. Because of this, he was actually a staunch defender of free markets. He argued that the government should not fix prices when the rise is natural, because doing so would force merchants to sell at a loss, causing goods to disappear entirely. Most ancient rulers believed they had to control every price. Ibn Taymiyyah was radical because he said, "Let the market work." Principle number 3, the justice trigger: when to intervene. However, and this is the critical nuance, he did not believe in an unregulated free. This brings us to the third principle, the justice trigger. Ibn Taymiyyah argued that while the state shouldn't touch natural prices, it has an obligation to crush artificial prices. He identified specific market manipulations that required the state to step in. Hoarding idikar: if a merchant hides essential goods like food during a shortage to drive up prices. Information asymmetry: if a sophisticated city trader tricks a rural nomad who doesn't know the market rate. In these cases, he argued for tasir price fixing. He stated that if merchants refuse to sell essential goods, except at an exploitative price, the government must step in and force them to sell at the equivalent value. Thaman al-Mithal. In a nutshell, the market is free until it becomes a tool for oppression. So, we have these 3 ancient principles. It's one thing to understand the history, but it's another to actually apply this mental model to our lives today. Here is how I personally view this. Living in a time of high inflation and speculative bubbles, I've started using Ibn Taymiyyah's mirror concept to evaluate my own assets. I ask myself, am I holding real value? Or am I just holding the mirror? It has pushed me to focus less on hoarding currency, which loses value, and more on acquiring assets that have real utility skills, land, or businesses that serve people. Furthermore, his concept of just price has changed how I view ethical business. It's a reminder that profit is allowed, but exploitation is a system error. There is so much more to unpack in the history of Islamic economics. If you want to go deeper, I highly recommend reading The Economic Thought of Ibn Taymiyyah. It is a dense read, but it will completely change your perspective on the history of capitalism. I've dropped a link to it in the description below. And I have a question for you. Do you think modern governments should intervene more in price fixing, or should they leave the market entirely alone? I'd love to read your thoughts in the comments. I usually learn more from you guys than the books themselves.